Okay, picture this. It's October 2025, and right in broad daylight, thieves pull off an absolutely audacious $100 million heist at the Louvre. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unraveling the whole thing, the timeline, the suspects, and the honestly shocking economics behind modern art crime. We're going to look at exactly how criminals managed to penetrate the world's most visited museum and what their true motivations actually were.
Smash, grab, and melt it down as quickly as possible. That's a quote from art recovery expert Christopher Marinello, and it perfectly hits the nail on the head regarding the brutal motive behind this historic crime. You know, Hollywood has kind of trained us to believe that art heists are carried out by these sophisticated tuxedo-wearing masterminds stealing to order for some secret billionaire. But the reality? It's much more tragic and deeply practical. It's not about preserving the art at all. It's just about liquidating it.
So let's get into Section 1, the 7-minute heist.
To truly grasp this massive cultural loss, we have to look at the heart-pounding speed of the robbery itself. At 9:30 a.m., a stolen truck pulls up. Guys hop out in high-visibility vests, looking exactly like your everyday maintenance workers, and they set up a vehicle-mounted ladder. By 9:34, they've sliced right through a first-floor window of the Apollo Gallery. They spend literally 3 minutes and 58 seconds inside, using battery-powered disc cutters to smash open the display cases. And by 9:40 a.m., they're speeding away into Paris traffic on motorbikes, less than 7 minutes for the whole shebang.
8,482. That is the sheer quantity of diamonds stolen. And actually, that's not even all of it. They also grabbed 35 emeralds, 34 sapphires, and 112 pearls. We are talking about intricately crafted suites of royal and imperial jewelry that belong to legendary figures like Empress Eugenie and Marie-Louise. The scale of this haul, achieved in under 4 minutes, is just mind-boggling. So over $100 million in Napoleonic jewels just vanished. But honestly, more than the monetary value, it's the monumental cultural loss. The Apollo Gallery reads like a golden timeline of France itself. These weren't just shiny ornaments, they were literal chapters of a national record, violently torn out and stuffed into a couple of duffel bags.
Which brings us to Section 2, Tracking the Thieves.
Now, the execution inside the museum seemed totally flawless, but it quickly unraveled. The thieves got a little sloppy. They left DNA on the smashed glass of the display cases and on a motorcycle helmet they dropped during the getaway. The investigation moved incredibly fast. French police tracked down a suspect known as XH2 right at Charles de Gaulle Airport. He had a one-way ticket to Algeria and literally nothing in his bag but clothes and a motorcycle helmet. Another suspect, XH1, was arrested and confessed to climbing into the gallery. But here's the twist. He wasn't the mastermind. He said he was hired by mysterious contractors with Slavic accents.
15,000 euros. That's it. These arrested men claim they were just hired muscle, paid a measly 15 grand each for pulling off a $100 million job. They were just foot soldiers. One of them even claimed he thought they were robbing some random corporate office that'd be empty on a Sunday. He didn't even realize they were hitting the world's most famous museum until the last minute.
All right, let's look at Section 3, Smash, Grab, and Melt.
This whole thing raises a really fascinating question. Why target the Louvre instead of, say, a high-end retail jewelry store? Well, this perfectly illustrates the modern art thief's logic. Today, retail stores like Cartier, they are heavily guarded fortresses. Armed guards, overnight vaults with seismic detectors, the works. Historic museums, on the other hand, are vulnerable public spaces. They're housed in centuries-old buildings with strict preservation laws. I mean, you can't exactly slap modern bulletproof glass or heavy external barriers onto a historic palace without ruining the architecture, right?
So what actually happens to the jewels now? Like we said, stealing to order is movie magic. The harsh reality is that these priceless artifacts are likely being destroyed as we speak, to be sold as raw, untraceable materials. Interpol immediately flagged them, meaning they are instantly recognizable globally. No legitimate auction house would touch them with a 10-foot pole. So the gold gets melted down, the antique gems are smuggled to diamond hubs in places like Antwerp or India to be recut. It lowers their value, sure, but it completely erases the evidence of the crime. Gone forever.
This naturally leads us to Section 4, a deafening security wake-up. How does 4 guys with a rented lift and a power tool breach a national fortress? Well, a leaked state auditor report used these exact words, a deafening wake-up call. They used that to describe the catastrophic, deeply rooted security failures at this 232-year-old institution. This wasn't just a streak of bad luck, it was a systemic disaster waiting to happen. Let's look at the actual security measures, or lack thereof. According to the audit, only 39% of the museum's rooms even had CCTV coverage. When the alarms went off, there was no armed rapid response police unit. They just had 50 firefighters on site, whose job is to stop floods, not armed robbers. And those vital security upgrades recommended a decade ago, delayed until 2032. Why? Because the budget persistently prioritized what they called visible and attracted acquisitions. They wanted to buy new flashy art rather than protect what they already had. They practically rolled out the red carpet for these thieves.
Finally, let's get into Section 5, the Mona Lisa effect. Amidst all this devastating cultural loss, a really fascinating psychological phenomenon is happening with the public. History shows us that sometimes the dramatic mystery of a theft is exactly what propels a piece of art into global superstardom. Think back to 1911. A museum handyman stole a relatively obscure Renaissance portrait by Da Vinci. The empty space on the wall made global headlines, and people actually lined up just to stare at the blank wall. By the time it was recovered 2 years later, the Mona Lisa was the most famous painting on Earth.
And we are seeing that exact same paradox play out right now. This robbery achieved what no marketing campaign ever could. The global media broadcast rivaled the frenzy of Beyoncé filming a music video in the Louvre. Suddenly, millions of people who had never even heard of the French crown jewels are acutely aware of them. And Empress Eugenie's crown, the one the thieves dropped in their rush to escape, it's slightly damaged, but it is now the gallery's biggest star relic. People are swarming the museum just to see the barricades and that surviving crown.
So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. In the strange economy of fame, where attention makes icons, is it possible that by trying to erase these historic jewels, the thieves actually made them immortal? Even if those stones are melted down and recut, the story of the 7-minute Louvre heist is going to ensure they are never, ever forgotten. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the headlines.